there is no effective solution to the food crisis without reintegrating Ukraine's food production, as well as the food and fertilizer produced by Russia and Belarus, into world markets despite the war.
Just eat one more chapati. That's my mother's pet line. It is impossible for her to refrain from asking us to eat more. Mother's love. But that's not the case for everyone out there. As climate changes heighten the competition for already limited and depleting food resources, food insecurity is another rising issue. This issue is closely connected to the international wheat shortage, the wheat crisis. What? Is that a thing? What does it mean? So, there's no more wheat, no more bread? Wait. I'll answer all your questions in this video. So sit back, relax, and let us discuss what is the wheat crisis. Following corn and soybeans, wheat is the third most common and widespread crop. As one of the oldest, cheapest, and most versatile grains, it remains today a critical component of food security. This nutritious grain is essential in ensuring a sustainable global food supply for current and future generations. So, why is wheat suddenly the subject of international deliberation? Well, for centuries, wheat has been a staple ingredient not only in industrialized nations but especially in developing countries. Today, over 80% of the world's wheat is used for flour. Despite being so widespread around the world, wheat production is in the hands of just a few countries. A staggering 86% of global wheat exports come from only 7 countries, while just 3 of them hold nearly 68% of the world's wheat reserves, with some of the world's most vulnerable and impoverished countries relying on them for more than half of their wheat imports. Both Ukraine and Russia are key players in the highly concentrated international wheat market. Described by many as the breadbaskets for much of the world, these 2 nations alone account for about 30% of the world's wheat exports. Most of the wheat they produce is sent to North Africa, the Middle East and Asia, with countries like Egypt, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Turkey and Yemen among the largest importers. In 2020, Russia and Ukraine also contributed 20% to the total food commodities procured by the World Food Programme, playing a key role in protecting food security in developing nations around the world. Does this mean that the war in Ukraine sparked a global wheat crisis? Somewhat, yes. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2020 drastically changed the situation. Since the beginning of the war, experts have been warning about the possibility of wheat shortages. They initially feared that Ukrainian farmers might not be able to harvest all existing crops or even plant new ones this year, leading to the disruption of both local and national supply chains. However, nearly 4 months into the conflict, it is now clear that the impact could be much larger than anticipated and could potentially compromise wheat supplies worldwide. The armed conflicts led to immediate food shortages in the country, directly involved, and the effects of war on the food chain will always eventually be felt on a larger scale.
Ukrainians can't plant right now and can't get their wheat in the ground. It does mean that the 2022 planting season will not yield much if they get some in, or the size harvest that the world is anticipating.
So how bad is the condition? Well, we are on the brink of a global food crisis. However, the situation we found ourselves in is more complicated than we might think. The destiny of more than 55 million tons of wheat, the total amount produced by Russia and Ukraine combined, is uncertain because of the ongoing conflict. And the biggest problem the war-torn country is facing is not how to produce it, but how to get it out. More than 90% of Ukraine's wheat exports makes it out of the nation through the Black Sea. However, Russian soldiers have now seized the airports, forcing the countries to export its commodities by rail, barge or truck, which however can only handle a small fraction of the exports in comparison to cargo ships. As the conflict evolves and the situation becomes increasingly unstable, the world is bracing for the impact of a potential global wheat crisis. The United Nations warned that 30 to 40% of the autumn 2022 harvest in Ukraine is at risk, as farmers have been unable to plant crops. This could result in a potential loss of 19 to 34 million tons of export this year. The consequences of a protracted war could be even more dire, with the numbers likely to reach up to 43 million tons, equivalent to the caloric intake of nearly 150 million people. But the war in Ukraine is not the only issue. Despite having devastating consequences in the global food supply chain, the war in Ukraine is only worsening an issue that existed long before the country was invaded. Climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic had already heavily compromised crops worldwide over the past 2 years, disrupting exports, sparking a rise in food prices, and increasing poverty and hunger in the world's least developed nations. Climate change-related events play an increasingly crucial role in food insecurity. In summer 2021, the world faced a wheat shortage due to heat waves and droughts that hit the US and Canada, the second and third largest wheat exporters after Russia. Similarly, China faced the worst crops condition due to climate change last year, when chart-topping rains damaged almost 30 million acres of crops and delayed planting on more than 18 million acres of land, about 1/3 of China's total winter wheat estate. How's India doing among all this? This year, the situation is even more critical and all eyes are on India. The South Asian country is currently dealing with a record-breaking heat wave that is harming food crops, with wheat yields falling by nearly half in the worst affected areas and heavily impacting the already precarious economy. When discussions about a potential wheat shortage and amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine began in March 2022, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that the country would step in and seize the gap left by the war in the wheat export market. Indeed, last year, India achieved record-breaking wheat production during its Rabi season, which takes place in winter, usually around October and November, and it was on track for another prosperous year. However, Modi took a step back and decided to halt wheat exports amid the long-lasting heat waves that has put the country on its knees and heavily damaged its crops. Some Indian farmers have estimated that 10% to 15% of their crops have already been irreversibly compromised by the extreme heat and future prospects, which do not look encouraging. Indeed, while harvesting has just ended, the heat could compromise plants and prevent them from forming any grain at all by the time the next Rabi season kicks in. The global supply shortage has already contributed to a spark in wheat prices, which rose 40% between February and April 2022. The economic instability and food insecurity triggered by the invasion has so far pushed 20 nations to impose restrictions on exports of wheat, maize, and other staples, covering around 17% of calories traded globally. Yet experts fear that such large-scale protectionism could potentially have a ripple effect and further drive up prices worldwide, fueling poverty and hunger in the poorest countries and leading to a much-feared global food crisis, which would once again affect those who can least afford it. While we sit at home and look at people trying to survive this crisis, the least we can do is value what we own, prevent food wastage, and whenever possible, help out people around us who are in need of food. Let's all hope the wheat crisis never gets to expand itself and things get better for our fellow world citizens. But do you know what can make things better for us? You. Your support can help us grow and come up with more interesting videos on national and global topics. What do you need to do? Well, it's simple. Subscribe to Volt of Vogues, comment your views, like our videos, share them with fellow enthusiasts. And until we meet next, stay curious, stay awesome. Volt of Vogues, signing off.